Welcome back, everyone, to a Saturday edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones. Appreciate everyone keeping us locked in. And thanks for subscribing to the YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. And as always, we appreciate the good folks and the fans in the First Date on TV 14.1, TV Del Marva, channel 14.1. Definitely keep these guys locked and loaded. Check out the website as you're viewing us right now. You got good contact as well if you guys are interested in advertising on all these channels and the show as well. So we always appreciate the good folks at the First Date. All right, so I mentioned a lot of the NFL news and notes. Follow me on Twitter at Rich Q on Q. We'll get you caught up to speed. As far as March Madness, Selection Sunday tomorrow, some of the big news to come out of college this past week, if you want to call it resigning, if you will, calling it a day, Jim Boeheim, 47 seasons in Syracuse. Now, Jimmy Boeheim is going to go down as an all-time great, over 1,000 wins, numerous trips, 5 Final Four trips, 35 trips to March Madness, 1 title, which he won with a great team led by Carmelo Anthony. You would think Jim Boeheim would have won so many more championships. He had the 100+1 games because of the violation that was taken off his record. But it's almost like the changing of the guard. And Boeheim was not really supportive of the move to the ACC. And if you go back 20, 30 years ago and you talk about the Big East, it was a Carrier Dome. It was Tuesdays and Thursdays on ESPN. It was Louis Carnesecca, Raleigh Massimino, John Thompson, Jimmy Boeheim, right? Think about that. The Carrier Dome put the Big East on the map with the tournament and MSG and everything, and then the rivalries of those squads in Georgetown and St. John's and Nova and Syracuse, Providence, Rhode Island. So now you look at Jay Wright, you look at Coach K, you look at Boeheim. Oh, by the way, Pitino doing a great job. He's only 70 at Iona. We'll get to Pitino in a second. I think Boeheim revolutionized the game to some extent with the way he ran his offense and also defense too, when they start to play that 2-3. But even after 40 something years, it's time to move on, right? He's an all-timer. He'll go down in the annals, and he really helped put the Big East on the map. I know he started to kind of get into that curmudgeon kind of thing, but I'm a little surprised for 35 or 47 years, he only won 1 title. And we do look at that sometimes, do we not? But then conversely, when we go to the Big East, his old rival in Georgetown, I think it's time, man. I think it's time for Georgetown, and it pains me to say this because I'm a big Patrick Ewing fan, but I think it's pretty evident the message is not resonating with the players. They've had major issues with recruiting. Georgetown, it might be time to say goodbye to Patrick Ewing. Now, they got blown out the other night, 80-48 against Villanova. They finished 7-25. They had a 10-game losing streak, a 6-game losing streak. I mean, you got one player, Primo Spears, a sophomore point guard that you're trying to build around. They won 13 games over 2 seasons. They had a 29-game losing streak in the Big East. When you don't win in your conference, that's not a good thing. It's just not. And I'm wondering, though, is it the recruiting? Is it the guys he has around him? Because how do you not go and get some of these guys in Baltimore, in Northwest and Southwest DC? How do you not recruit and keep these guys in-house? And just because you were an all-time great, if you want to say you believe Pat Ewing is more recognizable with Georgetown than 15 years with the Knicks in the NBA, so be it. Fine. He had a great run as a player, 3 Final Fours, 1 title, would have won another if it wasn't for downtown Freddie Brown against North Carolina in 82. But when you go 2-18 in the Big East and you're 75-109 as a head coach, and the players aren't really listening to the message, it's time, man. And I think it's very hard for these marquee players who are great players because it's the allure, the spotlight's on them, and we look at them and they're just bigger than life. But yet, when it comes to coaching, sometimes it doesn't equate to success. Pat Riley and Phil Jackson were role players. They were bench players for the Knicks, but yet they turn out to be two of the all-time great head coaches. Why? Because they absorbed everything like a sponge. They were bench players, bench coaches, right? I mean, that's, player coach, and they learn from the best respectively. I just don't think the players are resonating with Patrick Ewing. He's an old school kind of guy. And when the president says, hey, I've known this guy for 40 something years, you cannot keep a coach around for sentiment. You can't do that with players, but you also have to be able to fire them and not worry about sentiment, if that makes sense. So I think they're going to be in a tough spot. And I threw the name Rick Pitino out there because he's only 70. Look at the success he's had. He's kind of returned the script on what was a, kind of a dark couple moments for Pitino. And then you got the situation with Mark Adams with Texas Tech. Did not coach in the loss earlier in the week to West Virginia. He's out because of some insensitive comments that he made. But again, conference play, 5-13, not good. 16-16 overall. So we're seeing it right there. Plus he signed, I think it was a 5-year, $50 million contract. Expectations were high for him. All right, a couple minutes before we get out of there, I want to get into Jalen Carter, the defensive lineman from Georgia, the top prospect, who, remember, was arrested, misdemeanor charges, reckless driving, which unfortunately cost two people their lives. He was pinched for speeding in the past. And I'm wondering now, here's a player whose draft stock, there was thought that he would be the top player taken in April's draft. And now you're seeing the slide. And I'm wondering how much, no pun intended, stock teams put into when a player's got off the field issues, the red flags, right? Because talent a lot of times trumps it, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're making the right decision. And when you go number one, number two, number three, there's this. When you slide and drop to the end of the first round or 16, 17, 18, hey, there's not as much pressure. Still as a first rounder, yes, you don't want to be that bust. This kid's dominant. We know it. Played in the SEC, Georgia, big-time game wrecker. Arizona was thinking about maybe drafting him. I mean, there's reports, these mock drafts. If you're Arizona, you're already dealing with your $200-something million mistake in quarterback Murray, where you have, one of his teammates basically come out and say he's got to mature. He can be a leader, but he's got to mature. That's never a good look. Now, do you want to draft a kid that's had a bunch of issues off the field, even though he's extremely talented? These are decisions that GMs and coaches and owners have to make, man, at the witching hour, because you got that draft chart, you got the grading, you want to meet with these players, you want to talk to them and look them straight in the face, eye to eye, read the room, find out what kind of man they are before you make millions and millions and millions of dollars invested into a player. That's a really big pill to swallow, right? So that's something that's going to weigh heavy on them. And then finally, we got a couple minutes. So how about Kevin Durant the other day, right? Getting ready to make his Phoenix Suns home debut in the NBA, slips, fall, messes up the ankle. There's reports right now that he might miss the rest of the season and maybe the playoffs for Phoenix. So from a betting standpoint, don't rip up your futures just yet, but watch now going forward how the line fluctuate with no Kevin Durant for Phoenix. Denver's still the best team in the NBA. I thought those comments by, Kendrick Persons on ESPN First Take, basically saying there's a bias towards black players, and JJ Redick, good for you for calling him out and calling ESPN out on the nonsense, because you can't push that narrative. Joker to me, Jokic is the MVP this year. He's done everything for Denver. I bring it up because it opens up the Western Conference for them. Lakers are done. I don't trust Kawhi and Paul George with the Clippers. Sacramento is still a young team. Golden State with some injuries and Curry. Memphis, you got that whole Ja Morant situation, right? So that's another issue. That's another franchise player that's been given the keys to the castle on Ja Morant for Memphis, and he's brandishing a gun on IG. And if you look at the collective bargaining agreement in the NBA and you look at the contract and the moral clauses, you do that. Hey, man, whether it's in the locker room and in the facility, he's doing it on IG, hanging around clubs and trying to be the man and play the man and be the part with the wrong crowd. And You start doing that kind of nonsense, and then what happens? The guys that are really living that life see you, and you're asking for trouble, man. And I know the franchise rallies around him, the city will rally around him, but someone's got to pull this kid to the side and say, knock it off, man. You're not that guy, right? You didn't come from the streets. Don't try to act hard. You got your whole career ahead of you. Get rid of these guys. But if he gets suspended, that even opens up the Western Conference that much more. And I think he almost sabotages the Grizzlies season, right? And Adam Silver is so protective of the reputation and how the NBA is perceived. There's absolutely no way he wants that type of video leaking out and that type of nonsense. He just doesn't. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out if Morant deals with a suspension. So you got Curry banged up, right, on and off with the Warriors. You got Sacramento, a young team trying to figure it out. You got Denver and Joker. You got Memphis and Morant situation. You got Durant now with Phoenix getting banged up. The Knicks had that great run, 9 out of 10 in the Eastern Conference. Boston, Milwaukee still there. 76ers playing much better offensively. Defense leaves a lot to the imagination. You got them out of the Eastern Conference. So as the NBA season comes down to the finish line, stretch of games is going to be very imperative. It's going to be pivotal for these teams to kind of separate themselves. When you're in a cluster seeding 2, 3, 4 games, a slide here and there, and all of a sudden you can go from a 3 seed to a 4 seed to the outside looking in. So, all right, with that being said, got to start wrapping up on a Saturday edition of BYP with Q. Rich Quinones here. As always, we appreciate everyone keeping us locked in to TV Delmarva 14.1. If you guys have questions on pricing and ratings and rate sheets and commercial spots, 30s and 60s, you'll see the contact on the page. Give Colin Walls a call, shoot him an email, and love to get you up and supporting the show and supporting the channels as well. But we always appreciate you guys keeping it locked into a Saturday edition of BYP. We will be back in the saddle next week. And don't forget, Monday to Friday, BYP during the week, 27Q with Brandon Jacobs. We got some good hits coming. You can also check me out calling the games for the TBL, the Basketball League, TBLTV.tv. As always, give me a follow on Twitter, IG, Rich Q on IG as well. And always do it in moderation. If you're going to gamble, if you're going to bet, have a little fun. Don't bet what you don't have. If you say it, play it. If you back it, you're going to stack it. Have a good sports Saturday. Until then, we'll talk to you next time. I'm Rich Quinones. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Back Your Play.